Professor of International Politics at Birmingham University, and he joins us now from the UK. Welcome to the show. Tell us, how do you read the status right now after Tuesday's successful meeting? It's been described as an initial success. Is there trust on both sides for things to progress?
Well, I don't think you ever talk about trust in international relations, but let's treat this as half full and not all the way full. What do I mean by that? Actually, for weeks, the Biden administration has signaled that it is open to lifting the U.S. sanctions, especially the ones that were imposed by the Trump administration in November 2018, the ones that have really affected the Iranian oil industry and financial sectors. But even after the meeting in Vienna this week, there's still a big difference between the U.S. and Tehran in those indirect talks. And that is what the Americans say is, look, we want a step-by-step process. We'll lift some sanctions at the same time that Iran returns to compliance with some provisions of the agreement. Importantly, that Iran pull back on its enrichment of 20% of uranium. The Iranians are still rejecting, at least publicly, that step-by-step process. And they're almost saying that the Americans must lift all sanctions, even beyond the Trump sanctions, before you can have any detailed negotiations about returning to the deal. In other words, Iran is saying to Washington, you go first. The Americans are saying, we need to do this dance together.
And there was a statement by the US Department which said, we are prepared to take the steps necessary to return to compliance with the JCPOA, including by lifting sanctions that are inconsistent with the JCPOA concessions. What does that mean?
Well, there's a whole series of, it's like layers of skin on an onion that you have to peel back when you talk about sanctions. Remember, the Americans have had sanctions on the Islamic Republic since the revolution of 1979. What I think that statement means is that, without saying it directly, that some of the Trump administration sanctions, the Biden administration thinks, were not really in the spirit of the nuclear deal. There was no reason for those sanctions to be in place. They'll be the first to be pulled back. But here are the three key words in that American statement: return to compliance. Because as they say, we will return to compliance by lifting sanctions, those are the same three words they say to Tehran. You have to return to compliance with the nuclear deal. You have to pull back on the advanced centrifuges you've been installing. You have to stop enriching 20% uranium, and you have to reduce the stocks. And perhaps most importantly, you have to return and allow the International Atomic Energy Agency to resume inspections. So once again, return to compliance is language that has to cover both sides in the eyes of Washington, not just one side.
And those three words, return to compliance, how do you think Israel and other regional countries will view those three words?
Well, we're not supposed to talk about Israel, you know that, because no one publicly acknowledges the Israeli nuclear program. No one acknowledges that has to be part of talks. You have to kind of keep Israel and other regional countries, let's say Saudi Arabia, to the side to get the initial steps to get back to the nuclear deal. But once you get back to the nuclear deal, then you have to take on wider regional issues. And yes, some of those issues concern not only Iran, but also Saudi Arabia, Israel, and even Turkey.
And on that note, thank you very much indeed. Always a pleasure to speak to you. Scott Lucas, a Professor of International Politics at Birmingham University.